Well, we briefly looked at a technique, a factoring technique called completing the square, and it's a factoring technique that will always work because with it we can find both real roots, and we're going to discover a little bit later, even use it to find complex roots, imaginary solutions. And again, when we're talking about what are we trying to find? We're trying to find the x-intercepts. And yes, we could graph it, certainly, and you could certainly use that to check your work. But when we come into testing time and we're asked to solve using a particular method or technique, I expect you to show your work and not just graph it and circle an answer. It's important that we learn the skills, the mathematical skills. So here we were asked now to solve an equation by completing the square. Now, let's recall that a quadratic equation or function in standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And we have that form here. So we've got the x squared, so ax squared, we just got 1x squared. At bx, we got negative 10x, and our constant here is 24. Now, this skill of learning how to complete the square, first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this, and this is called the linear term. The bx is the linear term. The ax squared is the quadratic term. Bx is the linear term. C is the constant. And we're going to take that coefficient, that negative 10, and first we're going to divide it by 2. That's simple enough. That equals negative 5. All right. And that actually is going to be our factor, this negative 5. But then we're going to square it. And this is where we're going to be completing the square. All right, now that we've gotten that step, we got two things that we need to know, what that negative 5 is and the 25. And then we're going to move this positive 24, the constant, across the equality, which means that we're going to change the sign. So then we're going to have x squared minus 10x equals negative 24. And now we're going to take this step of completing the square. So now I'm going to go x squared minus 10x plus this 25 that we found right here equals negative 24. Now, what I do to one side of the equation, I must do to the other. And I just added 25 to the left side of this equation. So now I've got to add 25 to this side. All right. Now, on the left side, we're going to now factor it. And I know what my factor is going to be. It's going to be that negative 5. It is that b divided by 2. Remember, we saw that something similar to that when we were doing axis of symmetry and finding the vertex of the x-coordinate for a parabola. So we're going to now say that x minus 5, I'm going to do it step by step. I'd probably shortcut this if I was working it myself. Times x minus 5 now equals 1. Okay. Now, if you don't think that's true, we could FOIL that back, this x minus 5 back. X times x is x squared. X times negative 5 is negative 5x. Negative 5 times x is negative 5x. Negative 5 times negative 5 is 25. I combine the like terms. I get x squared minus 10x plus 25, right back where I started. And so now we're going to set this as x minus 5 squared, because that's what we're doing, x minus 5 times x minus 5 equals 1. And now we're going to use our square root property. So we're going to take the square root of both sides of this equation. And when we do, if we're taking the square root of something squared, it's just the square root and the square is going to cancel. And so now I've got x minus 5 equals plus or minus, and this is important, the plus or minus, the square root of 1. Now I'm going to finish this off up here at the top. Maybe I'll draw a little arrow here. Okay. All right. Now, what's the square root of 1? Well, the square root of 1 is just 1. So now we've got x minus 5 equals plus or minus 1. And now we're going to solve for x. So let's see. Now we got x minus 5 equals positive 1. And we've got x minus 5 equals negative 1. Plus or minus 1. Well, we're going to add 5 to both sides. Well, over here on the left part of this, x is now going to equal 6. And on the right side, I've got 5 minus 1. Adding 5 to both sides, x is equal to 4. And so my solution is 4 and 6. Okay, not too bad. Completing the square. Now, guess what? We got one more we're going to do. All right, this time our equation is x squared plus 10x plus 9. So let's think about this middle term. And I want to find what am I going to complete the square with. So I'm going to take 10 over 2. Well, that equals 5. And then I'm going to square the 5, which equals 25. And this gives me two things. This tells me what I'm completing the square with and what my factors are going to be. And now I'm going to move this 9 over. I'm going to subtract 9 from both sides of this equation. And then we're going to have x squared plus 10x equals negative 9. And let's see, now let's complete the square. So I'm going to add 25 to both sides. I'm going to add this square to both sides. X squared plus 10x plus 25 equals negative 9. And if I add 25 to the left, I've got to add 25 to the right plus 25. Now, I'm going to go on the left side, I'm going to go ahead and factor this, and I know what my factor is. It's positive 5. So I've got x plus 5, and I'm going to cut out that one step. Hope that doesn't confuse you, because I'm going to have x plus 5 times x plus 5, which is x plus 5 squared, and that equals, let's see, negative 9 plus 25 is going to give me 16. All right. Now we're going to take the square root of both sides, and when I take the square root of the x plus 5 squared, I'm just going to end up with x plus 5. And when we take the square root of 16, it's going to be plus or minus 4. Square root of 16 is 4 plus or minus 4. So now we've got it to where we can find our roots. Let's move this back up here. So I'm going to set up two equations. I got x plus 5 equals positive 4. And I've got x plus 5 equals negative 4. All right, let's subtract 5 from both sides. And on this left side of the equation, and I got x equals, well, I got 4 minus 5. That's going to give me negative 1. And over here on the left, I've got x equals, that's negative 5, negative 4, which is going to give me negative 9. Now, you guys ought to be advanced enough at this stage. I am not writing some of this down, but you should be advanced enough at this stage to figure out what I'm doing. And so our two roots then are negative 9, negative 1. And boom, shazam, there we go. We've solved an equation by completing the square. We're going to do a couple of more where we might see a couple of different little wrinkles in solving equations completing the square. Hold on. Hold on. I'm coming.